So, we're back with another episode of AI Right, but today we've got a bit of a new spin. We're going to start a bit of a leadership series, and we thought there's no better way to kick us off with one of our own co-hosts, Megan Stamper.
Good, thank you. And obviously flattered that you're going to start with me. I won't take it as a sign that you're just trialing out something, with a friendly face.
We thought you were a perfect person to start a bit of a Glasgow success story, if you like. Obviously now as the head of data science for the BBC. So yes, we wanted to take you right back to the start, or almost the start anyway. So you've done your undergrad at Glasgow in maths, but maybe what a lot of listeners don't know is that you went then to Cambridge to do your masters and do your PhD. So how was that? What did you always want to go to Cambridge? Was that a kind of goal of yours when you were younger? And how difficult was that to actually get in?
Yeah, so it reads from a distance like this just very obvious success story, but I guess the immediate secret, which I'll let out the bag straight up, I applied to Cambridge for undergrad and I didn't get in.
Yeah.
So it was definitely like a multiple try, having to change strategy and then eventually succeeding and getting where I was aiming for in the end. But just to go back to the kind of last part of school and thinking about where to go next, I really wasn't set on any particular direction career wise. I made an application to Cambridge and a number of different Scottish universities, including Glasgow, but on a variety of different subjects. I really just didn't know where I wanted to go. Cambridge appealed because it was something out of the ordinary. Nothing at all about where I was at in school or parental pressure or anything was like pushing me there. But it was part of, I think, something that I still do today, which is what can I do that's a bit different? Like, where can I go and explore that feels a bit unusual? And so thinking about an application to Cambridge was motivated by that. It wasn't, a teacher saying you must go here. If anything, I had teachers almost push back, be like, why Cambridge? Isn't Scotland good enough for you? And so that was almost a challenge to deal with in and of itself. But yeah, long story short, I actually didn't get in at that stage. I don't think that was a negative thing for me at all. Now that I've been there, don't think I would have enjoyed it particularly at undergraduate, but that's maybe a different topic.
I kind of had two questions there. Do you know the stats around like success rates or entrance rates for undergrads, particularly for your maybe doing maths? I'd imagine
Maths
it's
is
pretty low.
This is a fairly tough application process, but I'd say it's maybe a bit different to something like some of your humanities subjects where the entrance rates are a wee bit higher. It's not completely out of the ordinary for someone at state school to go on and do maths or physics
Yeah.
at Cambridge. I think the application to a place like Cambridge is quite different to other universities. At the time I was making an application, to be blunt, they did not care about your extracurricular activities, how well rounded you were as a person. What they wanted to know is how much did you know about maths and how proactive were you at teaching yourself it? And the
Very
reality
good.
of my status at that point was I was too interested in too many things. I wasn't really that focused on maths and I didn't manage to prove to them my particular skill set of maths at the time. But that led me then to go into Glasgow, which has a completely different style of education at university compared to somewhere like Cambridge. Part of that's the Scottish system. Going into a course in maths, you set maths alongside other subjects. So I was able to do multiple different things. Suited me down to the ground because I hadn't really decided what I was most interested in. You would never have been able to do that at Cambridge. And so I think I ended up through a route that wasn't of my choosing, going through education at undergraduate level that suited me much, much more because I
Then what?
got to try out some things. I did some courses in psychology and philosophy alongside maths. I really enjoyed those, but it was clear at the end of that maths was the right focus for me, and I was able to make that decision while I was at university instead of it having been forced on me from an earlier stage.
Would you say that it speaks to your personality that it made you more determined not getting in first time around? Obviously worked out for you going to Glasgow, but was that what made you then reapply once you got once?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of put it out of my mind. I took the rejection pretty hard. I've always been a person that is pretty ambitious, and so that was quite a difficult like rejection to take. And so I didn't think of it for the majority of the time that I was going through undergraduate. I sort of thought, well, I wasn't good enough for that. Let me focus on something else instead. And I really remember this point where I had taken on an internship, and the mentor that was working with me during that internship was like, "Why are you doing this as opposed to continuing your education?" And I was like, "Well, I don't really feel like I'm good enough to carry on in an academic sense. I'd rather explore the world of work and just get out of that." And I think the next week I received a letter on the doorstep that told me I had won a prize for my academic achievements at university. I was like, hang on a minute, I've just made an assumption that I'm not good enough based on one fact from 3 years ago at the time. Maybe it's time to have another think about this. And then I really seriously thought about where I was going with the internship and all those job applications. Didn't really feel like they were the right thing at the time. Got back into seriously thinking about a master's, and then, yeah, let's try Cambridge again. Why not? And at that stage, I had much better support. I had the support of the
University.
lecturers in the university who were actively encouraging and telling me what to do and what not to do to make that application successful, which I hadn't had that at school, to be honest.
Amazing. And then probably for both your masters and your PhD, what was the difference like? What was it like life at Cambridge? I'd imagine your peers were incredibly intelligent. What was that like to work alongside them and stuff?
The master's was intense. The maths program, it's called Part 3. It's very historic. They take on upwards of 250 students each year. And it is the top of the top. So people who've graduated top of their class from maths programs like the whole world over, all coming together. And it was a shock to the system. It was competitive in a way I hadn't experienced before. It was an environment where I was one of very few women, and that hadn't happened to me before at all. At university in Glasgow, even within maths, it was pretty mixed and very
Yeah.
well balanced in terms of gender. And people were like openly competitive in a way that I hadn't experienced before. So they would be, from the minute you met them, talking about applications to PhDs and how they were going to make sure that they stood out in those applications. And it was a shock to the system. I found it a really difficult cultural shift that I didn't particularly enjoy. Outside of the direct course, there was so much richness. I got right stuck into football at the college I was at. There were
So you
loads of
did.
like social events and lots of like cultural music and drama and all sorts of stuff going on that made it such an enriching place to be. But the course itself and the environment of competitiveness was a real struggle at the master's level. And what was immediately kind of pushed upon you is you better start applying to your PhD and you better start getting your application ready because you've only got this 1 year. So you were immediately like thinking of the next step and jumping off into the next application before you even really settled.
And everybody who's doing a masters at Cambridge is pretty much going to then do a PhD afterwards.
A huge number were is very much accepted because of the nature of the masters that you were in academia to stay and you were going to go and do something PhD like. I think the numbers of people applying to PhDs in general is vastly higher than the number of funded places that are available. And it kind of doesn't matter what subject you're going to focus on. That's pretty much across the board true. But I was at a point in my master's where I wasn't sure what particular subjects to focus on in terms of pure maths versus applied, and the numbers of funded places for pure maths are next to zero. So very quickly it was, well, I'm not going to get one of those. I'm going to go for applied. And I think that set me off on a journey towards where I am of doing obviously very applied data work day to day.
So being in an academic world at that point, did you know then that there was going to be job opportunities in data? So that would lead you down
Absolutely
a
not.
career? No, right,
Yeah,
that's not okay.
really, really naive to that. The whole way through the masters and the majority of the PhD, I was still in the headspace of I'm going to become an academic. I'm going to become a mathematician, a maths lecturer. I'm going to carry on this research. It was expected both from PhD supervisors that that's what you were there to do and learn. You were honing a craft to become the next set of academics permanently. And it was also something that I thought I would enjoy as a career. But the more I was doing my PhD, the more I realised that that competitive, individual first way of working in academia was just not for me. And so I hadn't been proactive for years looking outside of academia to figure out what jobs are available. I was pushed, realising this doesn't fit. I'm not going to go do that. What else can I do? And I looked at all sorts, anything from software engineering, looking at the games industry, stuff in like fintech and banking, trading even. And it wasn't until I started to look at the description of some of the data scientist jobs that were available at the time that I was really like, this is the thing. This
That
is
you want
what
to do.
I want to go do. It blended all of the skills I've been building up, which mixed coding with like theoretical mathematics, with I guess just logic in general, with a more team-based collaborative environment. And it just absolutely sang out that that was going to be the thing I should go do.
So obviously you talked about coding. Were you doing any subjects that were related to computer science or software engineering at uni, or was it all mathematical and statistical analysis based?
No, I it's something that I think I've got a bit of a chip on my shoulder about. When I was a teenager, I absolutely loved coding, but in quite a front end, like superficial way. I loved your designing websites and building little like flash games and all that kind of stuff. I didn't ever connect that enjoyment of that kind of stuff with what computing and software engineering was in an academic sense. And so I didn't do any subjects related to that at school. I never picked up any of that stuff during my undergraduate or master's at all. And only when I was starting my PhD, where it began to take a computational angle, did I start to learn how to code. And I think I sort of resent that no one ever pushed me at that subject earlier. And I almost question, is there something gendered there? Because I've shared that with quite a lot of people over the years, and they often, women will say, yeah, me too. It didn't even occur to me. I'd never had any push in that direction. And yet a lot of men who are in software engineering positions started coding when they were children. And it was just so obvious that that was a thing you could go do and explore. And I just feel like I missed the trick. So I didn't start coding, and I didn't do anything even closely relating to software engineering until I was about 20. And then the relevance of it now to my job and to the work of my team is enormous. So there's
Yeah,
like a whole decade of missed training, I guess.
I started in data science recruitment 10 years ago in 2015. So I imagine you might have been doing your masters round about then.
Yeah,
But we were always so data science phrase was just being coined essentially across the UK, and employers were starting to hiring for it. But we were always taught that you wanted to go. So at that point, it was only PhDs that we were taking, or mostly. There wasn't a lot of masters
yeah.
courses in data, if you like. But we always looked for undergrads and masters in the likes of maths, and then a PhD in computer science, or vice versa. That, and then anybody who was in the commercial and had good soft skills. But yeah, that was the backdrop of the foundations of being a recruiter in data science. So that yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, makes
But then
sense.
obviously you get your PhD and obviously your different prospects, but you moved to the FT. What was that like? Did you have lots of opportunities in data science and you kind of picked from the bunch because of your background at Cambridge? And then also, what was the biggest difference moving into a commercial environment, having spent best part of a decade in academia?
I think I went through a similar reckoning process that most PhD graduates come out the other end of, which is you have to start at the beginning of the career ladder, even though you've just spent those 4, 5 years honing a technical craft. So I think initially, like many people, I assumed, well, maybe I've jumped a step. Maybe I can move into this career as a more senior contributor. And quite quickly, making a few applications of that nature, realised that that's not going to cut it. I don't have the commercial experience. I need to learn what it means to apply this quantitative skill set that I have in a work setting. And that means coming in as a mid, or I think even at that time applying for graduate placements and things like that was a thing that was being encouraged. So yeah, PhD graduate, you are told to go apply for a graduate job having just spent like 5-6 years with continuous further education. You're a bit like, really? Do I have to? Yes, you have to. And I think that's still true today. And I think it still surprises PhD grads. So I don't think there was a range of
It must have.
opportunities.
Do you think it gave you an advantage though? So obviously you propelled quickly through the ranks from kind of mid to senior to principal. Do you think that you can attribute a lot of that to academia, or that's just your personality? You learn things quickly and adapt to new settings.
There's a lot of factors. There's a combination of being really clear on where I wanted to go right from the moment I joined. So I joined the FT, as I said, as an entry level data scientist, moved into a senior position within 2 years or so. I think some of that was a recognition of the technical skill set that I had being very strong, and that, any relevant technical space I had to move into in that job, I could do so very quickly, given the academic training that I'd had. But there's something about a PhD that teaches you to be so proactive in learning whatever it takes to overcome a problem. I think that might be more crucial than the specific maths based or computer science based skills that I was picking up or another individual would pick up. So in order to graduate with a PhD, you need to have had some serious amount of self-motivation, because no one is dragging you towards completion. No one is spelling out for you exactly how to overcome the challenges. It's novel research. You have to really come outside of the box to find even the problem you're going to solve, never mind the solution. When you're in a work setting, having been used to that kind of environment of go-getting, growth, personal learning and motivation, I think it really does translate well into quickly evolving into whatever you need to succeed in the workplace. That's not going to be true of everyone, but I certainly think that set of skills and general motivations has translated really well into my career, and that's what's allowed me to make the jump each time. Yeah, being lucky, I guess, and the opportunities always being there. But I've stepped into them. I haven't hesitated or had to be pushed at any point. I've always
You
been very
wanted to
clear
go
that I'm
for it.
going to go get what I want to succeed.
So at this point in your life, you're in London, and obviously I'd imagine sort of early mid-20s. What was that like in pre-COVID? Obviously, you're maybe doing 5 days a week in the office.
Yeah.
The data science market's booming. How was that?
I look back on the idea of 5 days a week commuting into London. I was coming in from Kent. It was more than an hour each direction. Don't know how
Was the
it's humanly
standard?
possible, but everyone did it. And I
Yeah,
was 5 days in the office strictly. I didn't like at that time working from home. And I would
that was the norm.
just about manage to fit life in around work. I really I respect people who can do that, but I would never go back to that much time on trains, that much time just traveling to and from work. It dominated life.
Yeah, no, it's totally changed days. What about the industry in general? Obviously, London was doing a lot of recruitment in the data space in London at that point. So many big organisations, so many tech scale ups and stuff. What was that like? Were you inundated once you started to have the commercial experience with opportunities and lots of networking and meetups and all that type of stuff happening?
There was a lot. There was probably an event every day that you could go to learn about something new, to get in touch and network with new companies. I wouldn't say it was easy to jump from place to place, but we were definitely in the midst of that move from people having long tenures in one role before they moved on to switching company, if not industry, every year to year and a half. So you would have a lot of churn within a team. There'd be a lot of people moving from company to company within your wider space. I think the way I used that environment was to allow me to get close to the industries and problem spaces that I really cared about. It could have it depends on what motivates you, but it could have been the case that I just tried to accelerate through the salary side of things, or I could have gone into industries that provided more technical challenge. But for me, it was I absolutely love applying data science in an industry which is really rich, that media just has provided from start to finish. So being at the FT, being in that world with journalists, like I would literally play football with journalists from the FT and other companies, and the chats between the office and the pitch would be so incredibly rich. And they'd be talking
Right,
about,
okay, sorry.
yeah, it'd be like they'd be talking about how they'd last week gone to a lunch with this politician, and they'd learned all, you know, just being in that environment and doing a data role in an environment which I personally find really interesting, which is that kind of cut between politics and journalism and things. That's what kept me really excited and motivated. And I think I could have done data science in lots of different places. I'm so glad I landed at the FT
At the
and in
FT.
media. Yeah.
So what was it you were trying, like, what was the purpose of your role at the FT? What part of the media were you involved in? How did that relate to models that you built?
So I think it's worth emphasising that although I enjoy working in media, I am part of the back office function of a media organisation in all the roles that I've done throughout this time. So I am focused at the FT on what does it take from a data science point of view to encourage and grow our subscriber base.
Yeah.
So it's the B2C and the B2B commercial drivers that are the focus of projects that I'm working on. It is not that I'm doing visual journalism or working on the kind of the
Stories.
newsroom floor.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are increasingly through my time at the FT opportunities to do a bit more of that, and we see really interesting collaborations between those two sides of the business. But the majority of what we're working on is trying to understand the digital consumer and subscriber of the FT and figure out data-driven methods for encouraging more people to subscribe and for those subscribers to get more out of their time with the FT. It's a lot of product thinking, understanding user journeys through the product, using whatever data signals you can to learn about users, and then build models that will, you know, predict their propensity to be engaged in new topics or pick up an enhanced subscription. The B2B side was about how can you encourage ongoing repeat license sign-ups from an organisation, and how can you grow the number of seats that they have. So that's the kind of problem space that you're working on there.
Not as many people were buying newspapers, everything's moving to digital. How did the media industry do or perform moving to trying to drive so much digital subscribers as opposed to people buying newspapers?
It's another reason why the FT is a really exciting place to be at that point, because they were one of the first to move towards digital subscriptions. I think FT.com and their subscription offer is one of the first moves. Organisationally, I think they're one of the first to appoint a board member focused on data, so a chief data officer. I'm not sure the title at the time, but they really got what was about to change across the wider industry. They understood that as much as, you know, the classic FTU reader likes to have their broadsheet and be proud with it, that's really not the way that the market was moving. And because they were ahead of that, they had a maturity of data platform and data team that really stood out across the industry and allowed them to kind of make some quite crucial and defining pivots in the way that they ran their subscription business, and did so in a really data-driven way. And I think the moving to the BBC sort of, obviously it's a bigger legacy organisation with, you know, huge amounts of inertia, and it's hard to course correct, but you can see things that the FT was doing 10 years ago that the BBC is just now beginning to get maturity in, which is really interesting.
I think I'll talk to you about that. 'Cause that's interesting as well. In terms of then, so you've got a couple of years experience at the FT. What's the driver behind the move to the BBC? So was that location driven at the time? I can't remember. Or is
Yeah,
that
you'll
round about the
enjoy
time
this
I
one.
met? That's when I was first introduced to you.
Yeah, so every one of our Scottish listeners is going to enjoy this answer, because fundamentally it was being able to move back home to Scotland. At the point where the job ad came up for data scientist at the BBC in Glasgow, I had assumed my career was going to be London based probably throughout. I very much had the expectation that it wasn't going to be possible for me to do what I was doing back home in Glasgow. And the job I remember the job coming up, and it was my partner who kind of put it in front of me and was like, "Have you looked at this?" I'm like, "Well, I didn't think you would be up for moving to Glasgow, because like what are the opportunities going to be like for both of us, and are we going to manage to like both have a successful career if we do that?" And he was just like, "Let's go for it." Really excited about it. And I think I wouldn't have moved because I loved my job. I loved the team I was working in. I was doing really well in that job. If it hadn't been for someone saying, "You can do what you love, you can work in a similar industry, but you can do it in Glasgow." And
Get
that
up the road.
clinched it. Yeah,
Oh, very good, very good. And then,
the
so what was that
homecoming.
like? What was so at that time the BBC were really expanding across all their kind of core locations and really building their data team. Is that right? So
Yeah,
what
so
products did you go into to start off with?
there were two really fundamental initiatives that prompted the growth in Glasgow. One of them was the BBC moving into the voice space and exploring a kind of assistant and conversational AI. The second was that they'd built a team focused on trying to introduce machine learning into the BBC's digital product space. So I kind of joined at the confluence of those two things. So Glasgow was responsible for building out voice and AI space, and the recommendations team was set to expand and needed more data scientists. So those were the kind of key growth pushes from the BBC point of view. The team was reasonably small in terms of data scientists, but there were upwards of like 80 to 100 people in the broader design and engineering function that were being hired into Glasgow. So it was a huge time of growth in that office and that space. It's very exciting.
Remind me, were you so this is obviously pre like major LLMs and you're obviously moving into the voice space, but because you were involved in media and news, were you involved in NLP? Was that part of your role at the FT, or was voice your first kind of transition into NLP as it was known at that point?
NLP was certainly something that was beginning to be relevant even in the FT. I think media as a sector with NLP has probably had one of the earliest impacts in data science, because there is so much text-based and language-based media to categorize, to recommend to people, to find ways to use data to sort of sort through and capitalize on. So NLP had already been something that was of use to me as a kind of data technique at the FT, and then the BBC were, I guess, exploring the combination of NLP with audio automation,
Yeah,
text to
what's the use
speech
cases
and
for that?
speech. It's interesting because now their use cases feel really bloody obvious, which is things like conversational search, using things like Alexa and Siri, and navigating the world through speech. At the time, honestly, we weren't that sure because that broader market wasn't very well established.
Yeah.
Things like Alexa and Google, was it Nest, their first voice enabled device? They were all quite early to the market, and
Yeah.
people weren't really sure when or to what extent they would become part of everyone's everyday life. And it's interesting now to look back on that, where pretty much everyone has some kind of voice enabled device and is using it for some variety of tasks at home or in the car, wherever. We were kind of going into a space that felt really unknown at that point.
How much more work was involved in building something then as opposed to now with being able to use mainstream LLMs? Is it so much easier now?
So much easier. I think there are still aspects that are tricky around how to manage and govern risk and make sure that these systems perform safely and securely within a corporate environment. But the number of different automations and the scale of the large language models is just totally sea change. Like what you can do now, the kinds of problems you can solve now, given where we're at with the maturity of like foundation models and LLMs, is totally different to what it was at that point 5 years ago. There are problem spaces which people would have absolutely been suggesting at that time that they'd like to go and explore, where the technical feasibility just wasn't there. So you'd have a bit of kind of early discovery and early research, and you'd say, actually, the performance isn't good enough. We can't go ahead. And it's things like article summarization as an example. We tried that out with some of the very early small language models, as I guess you'd now call them. And we saw things that were kind of promising but required so much editing. They weren't really a time saver. It still required so much heavy lifting from people to get it right and to make it publishable that we kind of parked it, put it to one side. This isn't really a thing that's valuable to progress right now. Now, summarization is one of many tasks that is just bread and butter for an LLM. And absolutely, it's difficult to get it to a stage where it's safe and there's not hallucinations and it still needs editing and fact checking and things. But you can absolutely deliver a product that centers around that now. And it's quite exciting.
quickly.
In 5 years, the difference is unbelievable.
Crazy. Perfect. So then 3 years into your role at the BBC, correct me if I'm wrong, you get the head of role. So I think you're promoted to principal or lead. And I'd imagine you're in that stage, you're starting to lead people as well as projects. But then obviously you're promoted to head of. What was it about? What was your kind of credentials or characteristics that enabled you to take that step? And again, does that link back to your background in academia and stuff?
I'd say this is probably where I start to diverge from the classical capabilities, competencies of a PhD student, where quite early in my time at the FT, I realised that one of the main things I enjoyed about my job wasn't necessarily the building it all myself, but it was working with other people to enable that and to make that happen. I liked
Yeah.
working with stakeholders a lot. I liked bringing them into the start, middle, and end of a project and really getting them to shape things. I liked the forward thinking planning, like what comes next, what thing can we do in the next 6 months that we're not doing yet. All of those things that gave me energy and that I enjoyed doing lend themselves to some of the leadership steps that I then took. So I was eager to work with other members of the team to kind of grow a team that's greater than the sum of its parts, which basically is I really enjoyed management and people leadership and was able through like great managers at the time to be able to pick up some of that responsibility very early. I think within the first 2 years, I was kind of enabled to line manage people, grow a team, do get lots of experience of the recruitment process as a hiring manager. Taking that to the BBC, initially I actually wasn't able to continue a lot of that. So I went back to sole contributor, very much working as a contributor to projects from a technical point of view, but I was clear right from the get-go with management at that point that that was something that was hugely motivating to me, of interest to me, and as soon as they had the opportunity to let me go at a management position, I did.
Sorry. So at this point, are you saying as you've moved into the head of role, are you talking about your early stages in the BBC? You're given the opportunity to have leadership and managerial responsibility, so you've already got that experience before actually taking the step into being
Yeah, so
head of
this is a
department.
couple of steps back. So
Before,
I've
yeah, yeah,
started at the BBC. I'm a sole contributor initially. But I make really, really clear that my ambition is to move into people leadership. The first opportunity I get to do that is to become a lead within the recommendation space, which I applied to and am successful for. I think the next steps that come after that towards the head of are a bit circumstantial. So there's the massive expansion of the like engineering teams that I'm working in and the transformation of that to a product group.
yeah.
That brings with it a whole change of leadership. So the chief product officer, Storm Fagan, joins the BBC. She completely reorients the way that the BBC works, particularly in terms of the way that the data function appears within the organisation, and that creates some opportunities, which going back to what I was talking about earlier, I am making
You've
myself
already
ready for. Articulated that that's the way and direction I want to go for quite a time. I've been figuring out and getting lots of mentorship about what it's going to take to get there. So, getting lots of advice from line managers and peers and mentors and picking up all of the different skill sets that it requires. So,
so
I'm
you're
kind
ready.
of ready to go. And when that role becomes available, I'm like first in the queue to hit apply and get an interview for it.
Do you think that you are? So it's obviously different because the BBC is a big organisation and there's a big data capability in there. So naturally, there's going to be senior opportunities available. But do you think that it's easier for you to go to obtain a head of role at the BBC at that point in your career than it was to go external and get your head of position because you know the business inside out. And maybe speaking to people who are at a senior manager grade at the moment and they want to become a head of, do you think it naturally that would be better for them internally versus externally?
I think it's really hard to make that jump anywhere, internally or externally. I think a lot of circumstances have to be in your favour. There's a lot of luck in it. It wasn't the first and it wasn't the only time I tried to make that jump. And I think you're often, because in the data space in particular, there isn't a massive breadth of opportunities in any organisation for you to go towards. Like there aren't, tens of or hundreds of heads of data in general. You're kind of in a pool of people all going for the same stuff. And you'll quite often be picked to the post by someone who's got the internal domain expertise, or they just happen to have done, 6 month stint previously. So I think it's about persistence and going after a few of the same types of opportunities before you truly land it. And anytime there's an opportunity for you to like act up into a role or to gain experience in the point of there being a gap in leadership. So one of the things that I think really helped me, the BBC didn't really have senior data leadership at all when I joined. It had product and engineering leadership, but data wasn't represented at that level of the organisation.
Yep.
And so there was a space or a gap for a technical voice on data at a strategic level that wasn't being filled by anyone. And I lent right into that. And that let me build up experiences of being in relevant conversations at a leadership level that I could then rely on when they realised actually we need to fill out this level of leadership for data. So again, it was not just waiting for the opportunity to come along before I started getting stuck in. It was going
Yeah,
after it and making sure I
being
was
proactive.
ready. Yeah, but a lot of luck. Like I wouldn't want to claim that it was just that I had prepared enough and therefore it happened. There was timing of it being on my side.
No, 100%. So then, having the experience of now being in that role for say, a couple of years, especially at the start, then what's the biggest differentiator and what's the biggest challenges that come with that kind of step up?
There's a few things that really jump out. One is that in the particular context I was working, the organisation was just learning what it meant to have a data function at its disposal, what it meant to have data scientists, and how to make use of machine learning and AI within products. So a lot of what I was doing was about focusing on educating and driving that fluency in the organisation. And I couldn't rely on people coming to me with here's the problem to be solved or here's where we need your team. I had to very much like push a direction and a set of opportunities that I felt were key and try and get agreement and alignment on them. So I was having to very much be directive about where I saw data science having relevance and being able to add value and then try and win people over. I couldn't just wait for people to come to me with problems X, Y, and Z and then staff them up and there we go. It was quite a lot more difficult than that. So the maturity wasn't really there. So it had to be grown quite organic from lots and lots of repeat conversations with people. But I guess the opportunity that was given to me was that there was growth and there was the opportunity to hire. So as much as I was having to do a lot of the kind of early lifting of setting the scene and getting us to a point where we could start work, I had the backing and financial investment to go and build out a team when people were convinced to go after a lot of the different problems.
So now you're speaking my language. So what was that? What was that journey like? What was the sort of size of team you inherited, and where are you today?
So I think in the early years we had around 10 data scientists, and we in the first 2 years I think we tripled in size. And I am
Pains
sitting
me.
alongside I'm sitting alongside peers that have teams of hundreds of people. But in terms of where we started and where we've got to, that's enormous. It's a real big shift. The number of spaces that we've been able to staff up has gone from one problem space to about 6. And so we're really not just in terms of the growth of the number of people, but the number of different like propositions and outcomes that we're able to drive has massively increased through that growth.
you're not a centralized data science function, is that you're in charge of all the data scientists. You do it product related, don't you? That's how you teams are built.
Yeah, yeah. So there are a number of divisions across the BBC which employ data scientists, of which we are just one. What I would say is that we are the team responsible for helping to deliver machine learning where it faces off into like audience facing products in public service. Anywhere that machine learning is used to drive products like iPlayer or BBC Sounds, it's this team of around 30, which is kind of remarkable when you think about the size of audience that we're impacting versus the size of the team. We're tiny when you put it in that term.
When I'm on the iPlayer tonight searching,
Yeah.
I'll be checking out
You
your
can
work.
blame us.
I can blame you if you can't find our programs.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that actually I was going to ask you that, but I'll hold it for now. But in terms of then, so I would imagine one of the biggest shifts you've had to manage throughout this is the kind of AI boom that's happened over the last couple of years, and more.
Yeah.
Obviously, we touched on it. You guys had your own voice products, so you were in that kind of realm anyway. But how's that transition been over the last couple of years?
It has been challenging and exciting in pretty equal measure. I think to call it some of the things that have been really difficult, it's a space that gets people incredibly excited. And I'm very proud of the team and where we've got to, but we are not big enough to be able to go after every single idea that someone has where AI could or may have value. So that can be really challenging. Sometimes you've got to do the foundation work, and sometimes it's not my team that needs to be first engaged. It's not magic. You've got to get your data in order. You've got to get real clear idea what the user value of something is before you just pile in with AI and agentic solutions. On the flip side, going back to being or working in data science and media, it is probably the richest space I can think of to apply Gen AI. We have an absolute treasure trove of relevant problems to be solved and data to solve it with, where LLMs and Gen AI are relevant. And it's really exciting to be in the middle of that.
Could you give an example of that?
So we are, I think there was a Washington Post analysis of the sources that go into training large language models, and the BBC comprises, I think, somewhere in the top 10 of the most contributions to the training sets.
So if I'm asking ChatGPT to give me information about local news stories, it's then using the BBC as a source for that, and it's making sure that that's trained
Absolutely.
on the right data.
Yeah, so I think the point I'm trying to make is that we are such a rich producer of content that we inevitably have resulted in some of the training sets that have made these models possible in the first place.
Yeah.
But that speaks to a kind of wider thing. We produce hundreds of articles of news and entertainment content every day. We have sport, TV, audio and podcasts, music, we have every type of media available to us. And therefore, the kinds of things that we can go work on with Gen AI, whether that's so recent examples, we are making local democracy news articles available at a greater pace because we can quickly reformat and rewrite them using LLMs. We've got the ability to take the commentary we provide for football matches, turn that into text and put that out as data updates so you can have like a kind of rolling feed on your phone. There are loads of different problems where the kinds of content we're producing lends itself to an LLM based approach and allows us to kind of get stuck in as data scientists in all these different use cases. So I really do think it is one of the most exciting places to work at the moment with AI in mind.
I agree. So that leads me to my kind of final question. So obviously, working at the BBC, you're involved in such a public-facing business, and obviously the public are interacting with the product daily. But any products or services that you've been involved with, or your team's been involved with, that you're particularly proud of, that people would recognise, obviously given they're interacting with the company?
So I think the two products I'm most proud of are things that hopefully are pretty seamless that you don't notice we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So one of them is recommendations, and it is our ability to surface the best content across our massive archive that's relevant to you. We are increasingly able to provide personalization across all of iPlayer and sounds. We're able to, I think, express to the British public that whatever they're interested in, we have something. We're across so many sporting events, we have so many different entertainment categories and education offerings and so on that, it's important to be able to identify what for any individual is going to be top of mind and most interesting. And I think that's one of the highest value things that my team work on alongside lots of engineers and product managers and brilliant people, but really, really proud of that. The area that we're just starting to move into that I'm excited about is our search capabilities. So our search experience has often been one where you need to know the name of the thing you're looking for to find it. And by that, I mean, if you were looking for something that featured David Attenborough, but he was not mentioned in the title of that show, searching his name wouldn't come up with something on our products until very recently. We are now getting to a stage where we're using things like LLMs and we're using machine learning based approaches to make sure that we can find the thing you actually mean rather than just matching the text very explicitly. So we're just getting that level deeper and smarter. So yeah, when you come and try and find that TV show you're after, hopefully my team are helping find it more effectively.
Wasn't one of my last questions, but have you met Sir Dave?
I have not. I have not.
Oh,
I think as much as I love being able to do my job at the BBC based in Glasgow, I do think I miss out on some of the celeb spotting that my peers
good.
have in London.
I would imagine so. So for anyone who's maybe just about to leave high school or doing their undergrad and want to embark on a similar career in data science, what would be the kind of top piece of advice you would give them? I think I've got an idea what it might be.
Would be the top bit of advice. I think the bit that has been defining for me is being really proactive, going after things without being told. When I went to university and when I was at school, I definitely think I could get away with just sitting back and doing what I was told. I would no longer think that that's particularly likely to let people succeed at the moment. Things are a bit
Yeah,
competitive. Yeah, as I'm sure you'll find from the recruitment side. So if
absolutely.
you, it's not necessarily knowing exactly where you want to get to, but it's when you identify something that you're trying to succeed in, being really proactive in learning what it is that's going to get you there and then taking those steps, not waiting for someone, whether it's a lecturer, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a parent, saying do X, Y, and Z and you'll succeed. There aren't recipes anymore that you can just follow and fall into a job. You have to really go after it.
Brilliant. No, Megan, that was superb. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I feel
You're
like I
very
learned so much
welcome.
more about you than I've known you for years.
Yeah, it was good.